Welcome to The Writer's Dream. This is a show where authors are able to talk about how they write their books, how they publish their books, and how they market their books. I'm Linda Maria Frank. I am the author of Annie Tillery Mysteries, and I am the host and the producer of the show. You can find us on Facebook. If you have a question or you'd like to be on the show, you can message me through that Facebook page. You can also find us here at LTV EH. It's LTV-EH.org. Look at video on demand, look for my show, The Writer's Dream, and you will see several interviews. I've done about, I guess it's close to 200 authors now, and you will find us on YouTube and also on that Facebook page. If you're interested in good books, writing and reading, I suggest that you look at some of those interviews because there are a lot of good tips from authors. So today's guest is Deborah Garland, and I am excited, Deborah, because I don't think I've ever had a romance writer on the show. Can you believe that?
I cannot believe that.
Because
there are a lot of us on Long Island.
I know, and a lot of very successful ones, and who doesn't like a good romance, correct?
Correct. Who doesn't like a happy ever after?
That's right. So Deborah's the author of Must Love Fashion, which was her first book, and it was a finalist in the 2018 Gold Leaf for Best Contemporary Romance. And then she decided on a series, which is called the Darling Cove series, and we have the second book, which is Must Have Faith, the third book, which is Must Be Crazy, and the fourth book, A Must for Christmas. She had a Kirkus Review, which called the book satisfying, and Library Journal, which I think is better than Kirkus Review, says readers will fall in love. So tell us about your books. Give us a little tour through your books.
Sure. So thank you, Linda, for having me. So the series is, excuse me, it's the Darling Cove series, and it's 4 books right now, but I have a 5th book coming out in August. That'll be the last book of the series. It is a small town, family-based series, so the characters in the books are all in a family. Each book can be read as a standalone, but because it's a family, all the characters are there because they're all up in each other's business. Just very briefly, the first book, Must Love Fashion, is a steamy office romance that takes place at Prada. The second book is a second chance romance about a jilted groom who faces his runaway bride after 10 years. The third book is a single dad fireman romance, got dogs and kids. And this book has actually just won the Carolyn Reader's Choice Award for Best Contemporary Romance and is a Holt Medallion finalist, and they're having their award ceremony this Saturday, so I'll know if it's a double winner.
That's exciting.
And the last book is a Christmas story that the family goes into a crisis and they'll have to get together at Christmas, and it focuses more on the couple from the second book.
Okay, so I think that people will read your second book after reading your first book because they fall in love with the characters. That's my feeling, because I have a series as well, and I think if I didn't make the characters lovable, nobody would read the second book. So tell me about the characters.
Okay, so well, in picking up on what you had said, while I was writing the first book and I was developing the family, the first book is about the youngest sister, Gwen, and she has an older brother, Greg, and then a middle sister. That middle sister.
No, middle child syndrome.
Middle child syndrome. It was Sky. And I had originally planned the series that Sky was going to have the second book. But Greg just got to me while writing the first book. And I said, I have to tell his story next because he got to me. You know, your characters get to you and they scream to have their own story. So poor middle child had to have the third book. I moved her down, but that is what I hoped that people would also feel, that intensity, in addition to loving the main characters, but you want them to fall in love with your secondary characters too if you want to have people continue with your series. In fact, I was...
and it gives you subplots.
It gives you subplots, and then you build on those subplots. Then become the main plots of the next books. And I was really delighted when a number of reviewers had said that they hope that Greg would be in the next story, and that they hope that he gets back together with his runaway bride. So that was. So I knew that I had shifted the series correctly.
So that's good. All right. So. So you have the three siblings.
Yes.
Do mom and dad come into it at all?
Okay, so they are a family whose mother had passed away many years before, and that is a central theme in the story. And the mother died of breast cancer. So one of the subplots of the first book is and it's kind of my story, where Gwen has been having abnormal mammograms. And this is one of the things that she is dealing with. Her love interest, Andrew, is a widower whose wife died of breast cancer.
Oh.
So
it's a Long Island story.
It's a Long Island story. So as they come together, she's keeping the secret from him. And that's one of how the plot unfolds, and that becomes a conflict in their relationship. But they have a very strong, lovable father, Martin. And he is a policeman. The series takes place in a fictional town in the on the North Fork called Darling Cove. And he's a police officer. Greg is also a police officer like him. So especially in his book, there is a lot of father-son dynamic going on. But he is central to the story. In fact, when it came time to writing the fourth book, in the romance, you typically do just two POVs. You do the hero and the heroine. When it came to the fourth book, I created a POV for Martin because I wanted him to have a voice. But he's so central in the stories.
Well, I think there is a limit to it, but certainly I've read books where there are several POVs. You go from character to character, and I find that personally interesting.
It is right. Especially if you're telling a story that you need the reader to have all those angles.
Yeah, because everybody sees things differently.
Exactly.
So tell me about Darling Cove. I know it's fictional, but is Darling Cove a character too?
It is, and I write the way I describe it is more like my hometown, which I won't say where it is. But when in a very much earlier draft of Must Love Fashion, I knew that that's where I wanted to set the story. I wanted to set it apart a little bit. Long Island is a big place. There are a lot of authors here. Some do on the South Shore, some have on the North Shore of where I live. But I wanted to set it further back in the North Fork because I think there is something very special about that area. That's where the wine country is. And it's still farmland, it's still very rural, but it also has a touch of elegance in it, and that is a lot of, I would say, Gwen's character. She's a small town, but she's very elegant, hence fashion. She wants to work for Prada. So when I was thinking about what town I was going to use, I would say that it was Mattituck. In fact, in very early drafts, I used that town, Mattituck. But then I started reading other stories that they had all these cute little town names, like Rainbow Valley and Heartache, Tennessee, all these other stories. And I said, I want a cute little name for my town. So I sat down and thought about it, and because it is out east, and their towns are on the water, Cove, so I had the Cove, and then I needed to pick something cute, and then that's how I settled on Darling.
It's a romance, so Darling.
And
Darling fits.
Right, yes.
Darling fits. And your plots are?
They're all romances, so they're typically goal-motivated conflicts, so each character wants something, the other character wants something different, and in the course of their going through the stories, they fall in love, which will mess everything up. So it's a different plot per book. I explained the plot for the first book, where she's just got this job at Prada, and Andrew is not her boss, but they have to work together, and he's very, very cautious. He's still very closed off. I've gotten a lot of comments about that book that it really is Andrew's journey. It's his journey to accepting what's happened to him and having him ready to fall in love again. In the second book, it's the Runaway Bride is Back. That was one of the original taglines. And Greg was left at the altar 10 years prior, and he was kind of humiliated by that, but he's been,
Coping.
Coping and getting along and thinking that he's fine, and only when she comes back that he realizes how much he's lost. And he wants answers because she left very abruptly, and she wants redemption. And so again, in the course of them each wanting those two things, they discover each other again, and they dare to fall in love again.
So every book has tension.
Yes.
Because tension is what keeps people reading.
Yes.
Okay, how did you get into writing?
I recently just changed my profile because I had to think about that because I knew that this question was going to come up. And I was of an age where I was considered a latchkey kid, and there was no internet, and there really wasn't all those cable channels. And my parents weren't home, and I don't want to say that there wasn't much to do. I mean, they gave me chores to do, but it left a lot of time alone to just sit and and I wasn't allowed to have friends over, so it was lonely. So to keep myself occupied, I just created all these little stories in my head, and I still have the first full-length book that I wrote on a typewriter with loose leaf paper. And I still have that in my, and I sat down one day and I had this idea of a time travel story. And it was a romance, and I probably didn't even realize it at the time. And it was just this thought that I had, and so I just sat down and typed it out. But given the year it was, there was no internet. I knew that there was publishers, but I thought that you had to have some type of advanced English degree. You had to live in Manhattan. You had to be in that circle, and so I just didn't think that any of that was available to me. So I just continue to write for me.
And so eventually what happens is that the publishing industry has morphed.
Just exploded.
How did you publish?
Okay, so when I finished the first book and I started to submit it to publishers on my own, small press publishers, I received 4 offers to publish the first book. And then I went with this one publisher, and then we published the first book, and then we published the second book. Then 3 weeks before the third book was scheduled to come out, they went out of business. So within 3 weeks, all my books were taken down. It was very traumatic. But I had already invested in the third book. I had the Kirkus review already paid for. I had a promo already paid for. I felt like I needed to make sure that book got published. And if I had to do that on my own, I would. But then what's the point of the other books? Weren't there. Right. So I went into this mad frenzy over 3 weeks where I took the last files that I had from the books, because the publisher just gave me the rights back immediately.
Well, that was nice.
And they were going out of business.
Yeah, but
No, I know. So I found this one resource that was fabulous. Who in 3 weeks we recovered all, because the third book did have a cover, but we covered all 3 books. And we formatted all 3 books, and we uploaded. I'd say within 10 days of that happening, I had the first book back.
Okay. Was this small press again?
No. So now that's independent. So I consider myself an accidental indie,
because
I didn't mean to be an independent publisher, an independent author,
right.
but I am.
But that's because I was going to ask you about what happens with small press. Do you end up paying for things with small press?
No, that's what's called a vanity press, and I don't even like that name.
No.
Well, they were at one time calling it predatory presses, which I dislike even more, because it's basically what those companies are doing. They're a service. You are paying them, but you are getting something. They are covering your book, and they are editing your book.
Well, I'm indie too, and I paid to publish my books.
Right.
And it was, again, you're right. You're paying for services.
You're paying for whether you do it through a place that is called a publisher, which then you could either have your books branded under their publisher name, or you can give it your own publisher name. So for these, as of now, I'm the publisher.
Okay, good. No, personally, I like it for me because I got into this after retirement, basically. And so I wasn't going to submit this to a million different places and outlive, or the books would outlive me. And
Right.
I was happy. I'm not happy with the first two companies that I used because they kind of became very impersonal.
Okay.
And the last one, what I did was I took the first book and I republished it with additional material. Like I told the story behind the story. I
Oh, that's
expanded
excellent.
the characters.
Readers love that.
Book discussion questions, activities for writers, and I did it through CreateSpace, which of course doesn't exist anymore. Now it's, I think, Kindle Direct
KDP.
Publishing.
It's all the
same
thing.
right?
Yes.
And I'm going to do this with the rest of the books, and I did it because the books are much cheaper to buy. See, I sell my books.
Okay.
I don't depend on Amazon or anybody else to sell
Oh wow,
them.
that's so
I sell
you're
them.
in control. That is great.
And that's what I like about it. I like self-publishing because you're in control of everything. What your cover
Yes.
is, the whole 9 yards. So
That is definitely the benefit that, right, you hit it on the head. It's control. So I was explaining to you before we went on that at this time I am going to be changing this cover. And because I'm independent, I can. And I can do it on the fly. I can do it immediately. Overnight.
exactly, exactly. So how do you market your books? What do you do with social media and all of that?
Okay, so currently when every book comes out, I've been using a company called Itsy Bitsy Promotions.
What's the name of it?
Itsy Bitsy Promotions.
Okay.
So I worked with them for the first book and I had pretty good results. So now that is one of my go-to places as soon as I have a new release. I give them all the information, and then for 5 weeks, they just blast everything all over social media, and they have a pretty good review team. So I get a lot of my reviews through them as well.
That's good. That's good. I like that.
And then thereafter, I will post on Twitter, I'll post on Facebook. One of the things that has been successful is that when I drop the price of a book, I do a sale, I will use companies such as Bargain Booksy, Fussy Librarian, BookSends, and these are companies that have hundreds of thousands of people on their mailing list. So my book will go right to their subscribers' inboxes, and with my book and a description and links right to Amazon. But now I'm on Barnes & Noble, I'm on Kobo, I'm on Apple.
Okay.
And that's been I've seen
so
a
you've
pretty
gone
good site.
ebook as well.
Yes,
Okay.
these are all, and for each of these books, through all of those retailers, it could be either ebook, well, not Kobo, because Kobo is only ebook only, it's ebook and print.
What about audiobooks?
No, not as of now. It's too expensive for me.
I'll give you the information on how to do it.
Okay.
For free.
No, I've heard to,
acx.com.
Okay. Okay.
And what you do is basically you go on their website and you upload your manuscript to their website, and people will bid on it. They're called producers. They have
Okay.
the equipment.
Okay.
And they will do the reading. If you want to read it yourself, then you have to find somebody who has the equipment.
The equipment, okay.
Okay, so either way.
Interesting.
And I just pick somebody, and you don't pay them. You can pay them. You can pay to have a more professional person read, but you could do it for free. And I was happy with the woman who read my books, but you do royalty share.
Okay. Well, thank you. I did not know that. I
Yeah.
thought it was all. I thought it was something
No,
like
I did.
thousands
I
of
haven't.
dollars.
It hasn't cost. It's more lucrative actually than anything on Amazon. I sell more audiobooks than I do. So
I'm gonna go home and do that right now.
Yep.
Thank you.
I will
Thank you.
give you that information. And the other tip that I give to authors is if you want to do library talks, libraries really, especially on Long Island, are not too hot to have authors because there are so many authors on Long Island. I mean, it's unbelievable how many there are. And they can get well-known authors to come and talk, especially various libraries in affluent neighborhoods, so to speak. So what you do to get into a library is you come up with a lecture that you
Okay.
do. Like how how you could do how you write a romance
Okay.
novel, or something related to it, or how to put history into romance, or whatever. But you come up with a lecture, and then they like that. And also men's clubs, women's clubs. That's, and so you'll get paid for the lecture.
Really?
Which is nice. You may not sell books, but you'll get paid for the lecture, which is nice.
Well, plus it's also then exposure. Somebody is
Yes,
seeing
yes.
who you are, and
Exactly. I do a series of lectures on forensic science, topics in forensic science, and they're all
that's
like
exciting.
famous murder cases.
and you use
it's
that for
not
your
dry.
books, right? Your mysteries.
Yeah, and then I'm introduced as the author of. And sometimes I sell books, sometimes I don't. But yeah, it's exposure, and I like talking about forensic science.
Well, it's cool, and there are a lot of television shows now.
Yeah, well, that's my tagline for my books is Nancy Drew meets CSI, because I have a heroine who, she's not really like Nancy Drew. Nancy Drew is, every once in a while I'll buy an updated Nancy Drew, and
Okay.
my character is a little bit more fraught. She has a few little problems here and there with family issues and whatnot, and also
Sounds like she's more of a complicated.
yeah, she's
in-depth
a
character.
more modern
Modern.
character. She's not perfect. Nancy Drew was perfect, but Nancy Drew made me a lifetime reader, so I can't complain about it.
You can't complain.
I
No, that's
can't
great
complain.
that you had that one thing that drew you into either the genre or writing. That is great.
Do you have like a favorite author who kind of drew you into romance writing, or do you have a romance writer who you like better than yourself?
Well, now like everybody better. Well, I first started my foray into reading romance was historical romance.
Yeah.
And I guess because I didn't really understand what contemporary romance was about, I think at the time it was more westerns and the bodice rippers,
Yeah, the
and
bodice
I got to those later. But so I would say, and she's known for a lot of other things, but Sylvia Day wrote a book that I think I probably have read it 100 times now. It's called 7 Years to Sin. And that is the book I felt that helped me understand that I am a writer, that I could tell this kind of story. Not as well, but when I was, whenever I would struggle with my books, I would go back and I would read through scenes and understand how she would set up a scene where that you just can't have people talking for 10 pages. Someone's got to sit, and someone has to cross a leg, and somebody has to hold a chalice of wine, and they have to.
And it has to be a chalice. It just can't be a glass.
Right. And that particular book, a large part of it took place on a ship. And then I wonder why then my first book became a cruise love story. Maybe inadvertently I had done that. But and then I had gone back and I'd read several of her other historical romances. She is famous also for contemporary romance, but I would say that's probably the person that I do. But what happens with romance is once you get hooked, you don't care who wrote it. You just go, and this was before I got into the ebooks. I was a little slow to get on the ebook thing. But I would go to Barnes & Noble, and I would just go through the shelf, and I'd be like, oh, that cover looks good. And so if you look at my bookshelf at home, it is just a variety of authors. So, and now that I'm sort of in the biz, and I'm a part of two romance groups, the Long Island Romance Writers, and then also the New Jersey group, I've met a lot of romance authors, some who are very successful. So, so to say, who I like, I'll give a shout out to one person who's been particularly very sweet to me, Nancy Herkness, and she's someone who I've enjoyed all of her books. I feel like we have a writing style that's similar, and that just makes you feel a little more bonded to somebody when you feel like you're on the same page.
Oh, sure.
With somebody.
That's the fortunate thing about, writing in your genre, because there are a lot of authors. There are a lot of mystery writers too, but there aren't a lot of people, for me, who write mysteries for my age group.
Okay, no, but that's good. You want that.
Well,
because
it's
then
good
you
for
get to,
marketing.
You get to drive.
Yeah,
You get to drive the ninja spell. If I could mention one other person who's also part of the New Jersey group, Donna Allward, who I would say now I consider her my mentor. She had a beta reading company and service, and I used her originally for Must Have Faith, and so that's how I hooked up with her, and then she helped me with that, and then I use her now. She is now my go-to beta reader, and she loved Must Be Crazy so much that she let me put her name on the cover.
All right.
So, and she's a big Harlequin writer, so she knows her stuff.
Yes, yeah, I think
So when
once you make your way in
when
there.
she says, you know, I think I wrote this in one of the acknowledgments, is that, you know, when I always have her in the back of my head, like she would say, make sure your characters are doing this, make sure your character's doing that, and so it's always that, okay, Donna said that, so she kind of drives me.
We have about a minute left.
Okay.
So my last question is, every writer takes a journey. What's unique about your journey?
I would say what is unique about mine, and I mentioned this before we were going on, is that I'm very lucky that I have been able to do this full time. Not a lot of people do, and I give so much credit to reading posts from other authors who say that they are writing until 11, 12 o'clock at night, or they're up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and all I'm thinking is, my eyes don't work at 4 in the morning. So I've been very lucky that my family situation has allowed me to pursue this full-time. It's been about 2 years now, 2.5 years that I've been full-time. So that's a little bit different because not everybody has that opportunity.
Is this a character?
I am a huge pug lover. I had 2 pugs. One passed away, so I just have my one pug.
Does the pug appear in the books?
No, pugs do not appear in that book I mentioned to you. That she had a pug, so maybe that 7 Years to Sin, she had a pug. But I got this pin at another book signing from another author, Sandra Bernino, and I loved it, and so now it comes with me.
Next book.
Everywhere.
Excuse me.
I go. I know.
The pug has to.
Well, no, the pugs are mine. The pugs. No, but there's a big character, a dog, a golden retriever called Casey in Must Be Crazy, and it connects with Edward's son, and the kid, you know, what they said, don't do the kids and the dogs. No, for romance, you want kids, you want dogs, because that just really pulls on everyone's heartstrings.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you.